From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Sweetney Gray. Five social leaders were killed in Colombia on Thursday, bringing the total number of murders of leaders to 24 in the last month. And Cesar Cifuentes is the latest victim. He was killed at gunpoint in the municipality of Chaparral in Tolima. The bishops of the Episcopal Conference rejected the assassination of the social leaders across the country and held a minute of silence to protest their murders. They said the communities are facing a humanitarian crisis. Social organizations are demanding that the government dismantle paramilitarism, the main threat to leaders in the country. They also ask for a bilateral ceasefire with the National Liberation Army, or ELN, as well as safety guarantees for the communities involved in the implementation of peace. People have been displaced in areas like Catatumbo, Cauca, Valle de Cauca, Choco, and Nariño. Meanwhile, President Juan Manuel Santos said he will act with full force to protect social leaders. Santos has called for an investigation into the murders of over 300 land and human rights leaders killed in the past 2 years. He also promised to improve their protection and demanded that security forces be present in areas where the murders are most common. The president also said the Ministry of Defense will be monitoring the military and the national police who've been ordered to protect social movement leaders. Still in Colombia, the ELN remembered the 54th anniversary of its foundation as it continues to hold peace talks with the government. In a Telesur exclusive interview, ELN delegates spoke about the importance of reaching an agreement of peace that the country needs.
The ELN has been fighting for years to find a way out of this conflict. That's why our delegation keeps the dialogue alive among the resistance. We haven't signed agreements, but we will continue trying to find a political way out of this conflict, to end political violence, and to make the urgent basic changes needed to create a peaceful resistant culture.
And still in Colombia, social organizations are on their guard as the Congress defines the framework of the law to be applied to fulfill the peace process. They are especially concerned on the modifications of the mechanism on the special jurisdiction for peace and are getting ready for possible legal action at the international courts.
Those who have denounced extrajudicial executions worry about all the benefits that military members have been given following the modifications to the special jurisdiction for peace.
What the court has ruled as constitutional was the freedom for army members as long as they appear before the special jurisdiction for peace. What the court did not allow is the benefits that they want to apply for army members, such as the freezing of these appearances.
In addition to these privileges, the Colombian Congress also approved the creation of a special court to judge members of the army instead of the special jurisdiction one.
What the new government wants is a special court that is not the special jurisdiction for peace. That is the bill they are working on. It gives an 18-month deadline because it needs a reform of the constitution. The thing is the government wants to grant privileges, and that is unconstitutional.
Senators who oppose this bill, proposed by Democratic Center Senator Paloma Valencia, say these modifications break the peace process and reconciliation in the country.
What we are risking here is to miss the truth because the new court will not ask them much, as the special jurisdiction is aimed to do.
For all these reasons, social organizations and victims are preparing legal actions.
We're going to court to contest the freezing of army members' appearances before the Special Court of Justice. We urge justice to reactivate the cases and to make decisions against military involved in crimes against humanity. We'll go to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights and even to the International Court of Justice if the state does not follow the commitments it took when it signed the peace accord.
This bill, prompted by the Democratic Center President-elect Ivan Duque's party, has triggered a deep social dispute. Nearly 2,400 army members who already committed to appear before the Special Jurisdiction for Peace Court now are fearing that the International Court of Justice will judge them. Only the Colombian Constitutional Court can give an answer as soon as possible.
Over in Brazil, political leaders continue to visit the former president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, in Curitiba. This time it was the leader of the landless workers' movement, João Pedro Stidley, and the former president of the Workers' Party, Rui Falcao.
We have the obligation from now until August 15th to gather thousands of signatures directed at Judge Carmen Lucia at the Supreme Court of Justice, so she can feel ashamed and is forced to respect the Constitution. She has to vote as soon as possible on the appeal that was put forward by several lawyers to decide if a person should be kept detained when there wasn't any trial like what happened to Lula.
The first thing he told us was that he was the candidate, not just because he's willing to do so, but because the people want him to be, and hundreds of lawyers and analysts guarantee that he can be a candidate. Keep in mind that the country is under great difficulties due to the government that came to power thanks to the coup d'etat. He said that he felt indignant that a president of Brazil is under the order of the vice president of the United States, which is a shame for all our children who were separated from their families at the U.S. border.
And our correspondent in Curitiba, Andre Vieira, interviewed João Pedro Stidley after his meeting with Lula.
The Brazilian people continue to resist and demand the liberation of former President Lula da Silva 90 days after he was in prison. We're here in Curitiba, where, on Thursday night, the Frente Brasil Popular movement held a meeting to plan the actions ahead. We are joined by João Pedro Stidley, leader of the landless workers movement of Brazil, who visited Lula on Thursday. João Pedro, how is the former president doing? What did you discuss?
First of all, the president is in great health, he's energetic, he's like a caged lion. He wants to continue the fight, but he's in jail. He has great clarity of what's going on in Brazil and Latin America. We analyzed everything that's going on in our region. He says that the Trump administration, after losing their grasp on China and Russia, has decided to turn its efforts toward Latin America by targeting progressive governments in order to gain as much resources as possible. We're hopeful that Lula can take part in the upcoming elections, because that would completely change the political landscape in Latin America.
Thank you, João Pedro, for your time. And we will remain here covering the resistance of the Brazilian people and their support for Lula da Silva.
The remains of the Ecuadorian couple kidnapped and killed at the border with Colombia are scheduled to arrive in Quito late on Friday. Our correspondent Denise Herrera has the latest.
Hello, yes, we are at the International Airport of Ecuador, Mariscal Sucre, where the remains of the couple kidnapped and murdered on the border close to Colombia are expected to arrive. The Foreign Ministry of Ecuador, José Valencia, said the flight is delayed, so the person who received the remains will be the Ministry of Justice, Rosana Alvarado. Their family are also here, and also the relatives of the journalists kidnapped and murdered on the border are here also showing their support. It is expected the funeral will be at the same place where was the funeral of the journalist in Quito, and later they will return the remains of the couple of Oscar Villasís and Katy Velasco to their home city, Santo Domingo. That is all for now. We will keep you posted with more information as soon as we can. Back to you at the studio.
Thanks for that report, Denise. Now, the supporters of the former Ecuadorian president, Rafael Correa, marched in the capital city, Quito, to reject the arrest order against him and what they see as a campaign of persecution led by the current government. Heavy police presence stopped thousands of protesters from marching all the way to the presidential palace in central Quito, and they gathered at the Plaza Domingo. Supporters also rejected the government's decision to recall its ambassador in Bolivia and to suspend plans to send a new diplomat to Venezuela. Now, that decision was made after Presidents Evo Morales and Nicolas Maduro criticized the National Court's order to arrest the former president, Rafael Correa. So now let's go to my colleague, Carla Gonzalez, who was covering yesterday's march.
Hello, Soyini. Yes, so yesterday we saw a march of about 10,000 people, according to the organizers. They are denouncing the fact that they say that the laws are being used to persecute Rafael Correa, the former president of Ecuador. They were not allowed at the Plaza Grande, the main square in Quito where the presidential palace is, so they later had to move to Santo Domingo. There were small clashes with police, a few protesters that were angry that they were not allowed to go in. We have some images of what happened yesterday. We saw elderly people, young people coming to the protest with music. They were very happy. They had signs up. Of course, their signs were saying that they were denouncing this lawfare against Correa. They were also denouncing the return of neoliberalism to the country, and they say that Moreno, the government of Moreno is aligning with powerful businesses in the country. Moreno, on his part, has said that Correa needs to face justice, needs to come forward. Correa is facing an arrest warrant, and we saw a lot of protesters saying that this was unjust. He's facing this order over a case of alleged abduction in 2012 in Colombia, and a judge in Ecuador has called for the Interpol to issue a red alert against him for his extradition back to Ecuador. The case against him, Fernando Balda, a former lawmaker, and they say, the people that are supporting Correa, that this case is mainly a judicial weapon to use against Correa.
Now, Carla, really quickly, talk to me about the mood at the protest yesterday, because you were there and you were telling me earlier about what you experienced. So talk to me about the mood on the ground at the protest.
Yes, we saw people very angry. The main protests and marches in favor of Correa, we usually saw a lot of people that were happy, they were supporting Correa, but now we see people that are very angry. You can see them in their faces. They are upset that the government is trying to link Correa to a case that has no link to him, that was already tried in 2012, and it's now trying to erase the path that Correa has led for the past 10 years in Ecuador.
Now, Carla, also, how has former President Correa responded to the charges against him?
Well, he said that this case, trying to get the Interpol to issue an arrest warrant against him and an extradition, he says that that will not pass, that in any country that there's a rule of law, it would be impossible for this to happen. He says that during the case, a lot of the judges that were put in this case were illegally put there, and for example, the Assembly, the National Assembly in Ecuador also said that there was no case against him and that this was unjust against Correa.
Very interesting developments happening right here in Ecuador. Thank you, Carla Gonzalez, for that update. Now we're going to stay in Ecuador. President Lenin Moreno is pressing the Union of South American Nations, or UNASUR, to hand over its headquarters building in Ecuador over uncertainty. As the uncertainty over the bloc's future continues, the UNASUR building was ceded to the countries that make it up. And we're going to ask UNASUR to return that building so it can be better used. We're not opposed to integration, but it hasn't worked because of disrespect by others. That's a direct quote from President Lenin Moreno, which he delivered via a series of tweets. The Frente Guasao political party in Paraguay has expressed its full support for the former president, Fernando Lugo, after the ruling Colorado party threatened to prosecute him for contempt of the Constitution. The right-wing party claims that Lugo bypassed constitutional rules when he failed to call another former president, Nicandor Duarte, to be sworn in as a senator last Saturday. The Frente Guasao said Lugo never wavered in his respect and defense of the Constitution. Now, if convicted, Lugo could face up to 10 years in prison. Well, time now for a short break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Social movements in El Salvador marched to the Legislative Assembly to reject a bill that could privatize water and to demand its protection.
Hundreds of Salvadorians march in the streets of San Salvador to demand that the new water law that leaves water in hands of the private sector does not get approved.
We call on people not to be fooled by right-wing politicians. They want to fool the people by saying this isn't privatization, when they talk about privatization that includes rivers, lakes and rain. We're fighting against that so that we're not robbed of these natural goods that are so important for the people of El Salvador.
The march also denounced the intentions of the presidential candidate for the Arena party, Carlos Calleja, who presented a proposal described by the social movements as an electoral maneuver.
The previous legislature should have ratified that reform, but the Arena party did not give their votes.
The entrance to parliament was blocked by anti-riot agents. A group of FMLN congressmen managed to gain entry to deliver a letter to the legislators of the Committee of the Environment and Climate Change, in which they reject privatization.
This law would give 80% of decision-making authority to private sectors, against the 20% that would represent the interests of the state. Clearly, this is privatization.
The members of the National Alliance Against Privatization proposed that the National Authority of Water must include communities and other sectors linked to the protection of water to participate, and not only the private sector.
Thousands of people took to the streets in Argentina to once again reject the massive layoffs in the state news agency Telam, ordered by the Minister of Communication, Hernan Lombardi. Political parties, social movements and human rights organizations also joined the demonstration in the capital city, Buenos Aires, to demand that Lombardi reinstate the 357 workers that were fired. That's more than 40% of Telam's workforce. The government of President Mauricio Macri launched a restructuring plan that journalists in Telam say is promoting an ideological cleansing against colleagues that are critics of his administration. So we're going to head to our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, who joined the march, and he has all the details.
A very important demonstration has been taking place here in Buenos Aires, organized by the workers of the state news agency Telam, to protest against the layoff of some 357 members of staff. Support for the movement was bigger than expected, with the participation of political and social groups, cultural figures, human rights organizations, as well as a large number of journalists. The aim was to press the Federal Office of Public Media into reversing what has happened and rehire the workers. This is a complex situation because the structure of Argentinian public media is being pulled apart. One of the country's most important journalistic outlets, Telam, is being most affected. Telam has protested against media monopolies since the 1950s. It now defends the rights of journalists. There are high expectations of what could happen in the coming days and what will happen in Parliament, where a law will be discussed to give control of the agency to all the national political parties.
Explosions at a small fireworks factory in Tultepec, a town in central Mexico, has killed at least 24 people, including one minor, and injured 49 others. 4 blasts ripped through the factory on Thursday afternoon. Helicopters took the wounded to several hospitals. Now, deadly fireworks explosions have been repeatedly reporting in Tultepec, as the town produces around 25 tons of firecrackers every year.
I saw a fairly large mushroom cloud caused by the explosion. Later, there was another really loud explosion. Then we knew that the factory had exploded. Everyone we knew that worked there is fine, thank God. It's really scary, but luckily they're all fine.
The trial of 7 politicians and businessmen accused of taking bribes from Odebrecht begins in the Dominican Republic this Friday. The men, including several former senators and a former minister of public works, were arrested in May of last year and charged with corruption. The case has triggered a series of protests organized by a movement called the Green March against what many Dominicans see as entrenched corruption in the country's political system. The Venezuelan finance minister, Simon Zupa, has ended a week-long visit to China. Our correspondent in Beijing, Isiara Diaz, has the details.
The working visit by Venezuela's Minister of Finances and the Economy is coming to an end. In the last 5 days, Zerpa has met with top Chinese officials from a variety of institutions. These institutions include the Chinese Development Bank, the National Commission for Development and Reforms, as well as with the Chinese Vice Foreign Minister, Li Yucheng, and his own counterpart, the Chinese Finance Minister. Throughout these meetings, they've been mainly talking about cooperation in the areas of energy and finance. On the Chinese side, they repeated that they are confident that this cooperation will grow in the future. In his meeting today with the China Development Bank, it was agreed that this bank will be sending a delegation to Venezuela to advise and help update the system of economic planning that the Chinese bank helped to set up in 2011. Minister Zerpa also said that the agreement had been reached for a direct investment worth $250 million in Venezuela by the China Development Bank, which is the largest bank in China and one of the biggest in the world. And they are still working on a number of specific projects related to a special loan made by this bank to Venezuela worth $5 billion for the oil sector. Zerpa emphasized the importance for both countries of their joint ventures in oil production, like Sinovenza, which plays an important role in the Orinoco oil belt.
And now for the World Cup update. The quarterfinals has started today with a great match. France is currently beating Uruguay 2-0 and is for now qualified to the semi-finals. Raphael Varane scored a header in the first half to give France the lead. Later, the five-time World Cup champion Brazil will face Belgium. We're going to take a short break, so join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
But unfortunately, Jason's school did not allow him to give his valedictorian speech. For some reason, his school, in a country where freedom of speech is a constitutional right, in the city of Frederick Douglass, turned his moment of triumph into a time of sorrow and pain.
First, I would like to acknowledge that I am the first African-American valedictorian in UPrep history. I say that not to brag, but to emphasize the importance of this. Hopefully there will be many more after me, and I want it to be known that this isn't impossible and it can be done. First, I would like to thank my mom and dad. Anybody that really knows me knows my mom, and she don't play. She made sure I went to school and I had what I needed. She made sure that I had good grades, and she always told every teacher, if it's a problem, then call me. Whenever I got in trouble at school, I got in trouble at home. And I guess looking back, I can appreciate that because it taught me actions have consequences. If she wasn't like that, then I probably wouldn't be giving a speech right now. As a matter of fact, I wasn't going to give this speech at all. But then I realized something. I realized that this speech is about more than just me. It means a lot to everybody that I mean a lot to. And I'm here as the UPrep 2018 valedictorian to tell you that you couldn't break me. And I'm still here. I'm still here strong.
Welcome back. China has accused the United States of starting the largest trade war in economic history. U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods worth $34 billion came into effect on Friday. China has retaliated by imposing a similar 25% tariff on 545 U.S. products, also worth $34 billion. These include agricultural products, vehicles, and aquatic products. China insisted it would never start a trade war, but that it will protect its interests. And with U.S. sanctions on Iran due to come into effect in August, the Iranian Foreign Minister, Mohammad Javad Zarif, has been meeting other signatories of the Iran nuclear accord in Vienna. Zarif said the foreign ministers of Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and China, and the European Union were trying to agree on an economic package to compensate for U.S. sanctions, but they failed to reach a deal. The United States says it will punish any country that continues to buy Iranian oil after November 4th.
The Joint Commission met to discuss the way forward to ensure the continued implementation of the nuclear deal in all its aspects and review unresolved issues arising from the unilateral withdrawal of the United States from the agreement and the announced reimposition of sanctions lifted under the JCPOA and its Annex II, which they deeply regret.
A Thai diver involved in the rescue operation of the boys trapped in a cave has died. Rescuers have been exploring different ways to rescue the football team and their coach, with one option being to teach them how to scuba dive. But now, with the death of the diver, it raises many questions and concerns about the safety of the boys. The victim, Saman Kunot, was a former Navy officer and had volunteered to help in the rescue. He went into the cave with another diver when the water level was low, but a sudden gush of water left him unconscious and he could not be revived.
He was on his way back after planting the oxygen bottles in the cave. Then he went unconscious. His diving buddy tried to give him first aid, but it was too late.
We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find all of them on our website at tellusyourtv.net/English. You should also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Soini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
So yeah, national security is one of the most powerful notions in modern times. To swindle, I think, people, to do things that are not in their best interest, and to support massive military complexes that are not in anybody's interest, but that are like cancers feeding on society.
Watch a series where the U.S. geopolitical strategies as an empire representing the culture of war and propaganda are shown, and how this has served as a tool of social control. Psy-War, Saturday, only on Telesur.